The sun had barely crested the jagged horizon and the plains stretched out in waves of gold and amber, each blade of grass catching the morning light like a fleeting secret. Layla Redfeather's hands were raw and speckled with sawdust as she drove another nail into the rough-hewn beams of her cabin. She paused, chest-heaving, inhaling the crisp air that carried the scent of pine resin and distant smoke from a neighboring homestead. The hammer in her hand thudded against her palm, yet she welcomed the ache. Every strike was a testament, a quiet rebellion against the whispers of the town that she was too independent, too headstrong, too alone. The breeze carried the faint hum of insects, the soft rustle of prairie grass, and beneath it all a whisper of unease that she could not quite name. She set the hammer down and leaned against the frame, eyes scanning the endless horizon. That solitude was both a balm and a burden. The silence of her cabin allowed her to think, to breathe, to build a life that was entirely her own, yet the emptiness pressed against her ribs with every passing day. A sudden shadow flickered across the edge of the rising sun. Her pulse quickened. Footfalls, deliberate and steady, echoed faintly over the dry soil. Someone was coming, and her instincts bristled as sharply as the prairie grass. Caleb Thornridge emerged slowly over the crest of the ridge, a silhouette hardened by years of wind and sun. His head shaded eyes that held storms of memory, yet when he moved the weight of grief seemed tempered by careful restraint. At 30 he carried both the strength of his frame and the weariness of a heart that had been scorched by loss. He paused at the cabin's edge, leaving a small bundle in the dust, a loaf of bread, a water skin, nails wrapped in a cloth. Layla noticed the offering, suspicion and curiosity tangled in her chest. Pride wrestled with the flicker of hope. Who was this man who lingered at her threshold without demand, without expectation? Days unfolded with a rhythm as quiet as the prairie itself. Layla worked, sweat glinting on her skin, while Caleb lingered at the edges, always careful, never intrusive. At first their communication was minimal, a nod, a word here and there, but the gestures grew into an unspoken language. When a roof beam threatened to collapse under its own weight, Caleb's hand steadied it with a gentleness that startled her. She met his gaze, and for a fleeting heartbeat the world beyond the plains seemed to vanish, leaving only the sound of their breaths and the soft snap of timber settling. Evenings were the slowest, most luminous moments. Layla would sit outside carving a small figurine from a piece of fallen cedar while Caleb built a fire. The flames flickered across his face, illuminating scars and lines she would never have noticed in the daylight. He would leave small gifts, a sprig of wildflowers tucked into the cabin door, a sharp knife honed and left near her workbench. Each gesture was a question wrapped in humility. Each returned glance was a silent invitation to trust, though neither dared to speak the words aloud. The prairie watched over them, infinite and patient, while the tension between pride and longing thrummed in the spaces they shared. One afternoon a wind stirred dust into miniature storms across the plain. The distant murmur of the town reached her ears, carried on the gusts like a chorus of judgment. She softened, someone said, letting a rancher close. The words struck her with a quiet force of stones thrown at her feet. Layla's hands stilled, a nail poised in midair. Was it weakness to feel her chest tighten, to sense her heart warming toward the man who had quietly entered her life? She shook the thought away, hammering the nail home with a force that left her palm stinging. Yet curiosity lingered, a persistent ember refusing to die. Even as town gossip whispered over the wind, an unexpected danger arose near her cabin. A small fire, bright and greedy, flared at the edge of the dry brush. Layla froze, disbelief and panic warring in her chest, but Caleb's voice cut through the roar of crackling flames, low, commanding, unwavering. Together they worked, him shielding her from falling embers, her hands steadying the cabin walls against smoke-stung ice. The fire retreated under their effort, leaving charred earth and a lingering scent of ash. Amid the ruin, a faint symbol marked in scorched wood caught Layla's attention. It was crude yet deliberate, a mystery etched in a language she did not know. Someone had watched them, or perhaps she wondered it was a warning. Night descended in a quilt of indigo and starlight, and the world felt both immense and intimate. They sat side by side near the dying embers of the fire, the scent of pine mingling with smoke, and spoke in quiet fragments of memory. Caleb's story unfolded in measured sentences revealing wounds he had carried in silence. Love lost too soon, a life of solitude imposed by grief. Layla shared her own scars of survival, of judgment, of the constant battle to assert her place in a world that underestimated her. Each confession was a brushstroke painting them into one shared canvas of understanding. The moon cast its silver glow across the plains, a silent witness to their transformation. Caleb's hand, weathered and scarred, brushed against hers accidentally, then lingered in a careful, deliberate pause. She did not pull away. The gesture carried 1,000 unspoken words, the promise of quiet devotion, the acknowledgement of a fragile hope. When he finally offered her a small pendant carved from cedar and smooth as river stones, she understood it as more than a gift. It was protection, respect, and a subtle invitation into the life he had built in solitude. Her fingers traced the intricate lines, wondering whether this delicate symbol marked a beginning or a question too fragile to answer outright. Weeks passed with a rhythm both gentle and insistent. The cabin took shape under Layla's skilled hands, while their bond grew with gestures rather than declarations. A smile shared over a repaired beam, a quiet laugh at a misaligned floorboard, hands brushing as they carried supplies. Each moment forged an intimacy that words could not capture. Pride and weariness wrestled with the blossoming warmth of companionship until the day Caleb's quiet voice carried across the plain. "Pick your things and come with me." The words hung in the air like the final brushstroke on a canvas, both simple and irrevocable. Layla paused, feeling the weight of choice settle on her shoulders. She glanced back at the cabin she had built with every ounce of strength, at the scars and splinters that bore witness to her solitude, and then forward to the open plains, the horizon stretching like a promise. Together they prepared a small ceremony, a celebration of lives intertwined under the vast sky. No townsfolk watched, no grand hall bore witness, only the wind, the rustling grass, and the quiet approval of the earth beneath their feet. Vows were whispered, hands clasped, hearts aligned, and in that intimacy they found a joy neither had dared to name. When the morning came, it was as though the sun had risen to honor their union. They rode side by side across the plains, the cabin fading behind them into a landscape etched with labor and love, while the prairie stretched infinite before them. Layla felt the stirrings of something deeper than freedom, a sense of belonging, of dignity earned, and of a life built not from solitude alone but from the gentle grace of connection. Caleb's eyes met hers with a softness that had never existed in the world before, and she understood that love could be patient, subtle, and resilient. As the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain, Layla's voice turned inward, a reflection for the world beyond the plains. Sometimes the hardest battles are those waged within ourselves, and yet even in our solitude hearts may find one another. In quiet acts of grace, in shared labor and laughter, life offers us a path toward hope. She knew their journey had only just begun, that challenges and judgments might still arise, but beneath the infinite sky she also knew that they had discovered something eternal, an understanding that strength, love, and dignity could exist together in a single life, and that the world could be both vast and tender at once. The plains stretched endless, whispering secrets in the wind, and as they rode forward Layla felt the pulse of possibility thrumming beneath her hands, beneath the hoofs that carried them toward sunrise, toward the life they had chosen together, and the quiet promise that every dawn held a chance to begin anew.